Ever get that feeling where you're like totally positive you're saying a word right, and then you hear somebody else say it and it's like, whoa, hold on, am I speaking some made-up language or what? Or like maybe you've run into an accent that's so different you gotta like really, really focus to even understand what they're saying.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, if that's ever happened to you, you are not alone. Even native English speakers, we have those moments too.
Happens all the time.
And that is exactly why today we're going deep, deep, deep into something that's like the bedrock of clear communication. It's all about phonetic awareness. And, you were kind enough to send over some really fascinating material that we're going to be diving into today.
Absolutely. And, your sources do a fantastic job of highlighting that phonetic awareness is really all about zeroing in on those tiny building blocks of language, those individual sounds, the phones that make up all the words that we use. But it actually goes a step further than that, right? It's about connecting those sounds to how we represent them, especially using the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA.
The IPA?
Yes. You can kind of think of it as like understanding the atoms of speech and having a universal language to write those atoms down.
It's true. The IPA, at first glance, it can look a little bit intimidating. It's almost like you're looking at some crazy equation.
It can be a little daunting, yeah.
But our mission today in this deep dive is to show you how the IPA is actually a super powerful tool. It can help you demystify pronunciation.
Absolutely.
So whether you're trying to, make your accent a little bit more natural sounding, or just want to make sure that every time you speak your message is crystal clear, getting a handle on phonetic awareness and this whole IPA thing could honestly be a game changer for you.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And when we're talking about this phonetic awareness, we're not just talking about like the physical mechanics of making a sound. It's about cultivating this awareness of the individual sounds, understanding how your mouth, your tongue, your vocal cords, how they all work together to create these sounds. And how even like a teeny tiny difference in sound can change the meaning of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's a big word.
This awareness is helpful in so many ways. Like right off the bat, it'll make your pronunciation more precise. You'll be able to express your thoughts more clearly and effectively.
And that precision, that can give you a real confidence boost when you're speaking, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like instead of just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping people understand you, you have this solid sense of how your words are actually coming across.
Exactly.
And something else that your sources pointed out, it's not just about speaking.
Right.
Better phonetic awareness also makes you a better listener.
Absolutely. When you're more tuned into all the subtle sounds, you become better at understanding different accents and ways of speaking. And, some of the stuff you sent also mentioned some less obvious benefits. Like it can actually improve your spelling and reading.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when you have a deeper understanding of the sound structure of language, it can make decoding written words way more intuitive. And for anyone learning English, your sources really hit on this. It gives you this incredibly solid foundation for acquiring the language more naturally. It becomes easier to pick up on and reproduce those tricky sounds that native speakers use.
Okay, so the why of phonetic awareness, I think we've got that down. But let's dig a little deeper into the what.
Okay.
So we often hear these terms, phonetics and phonology.
Yeah.
What's the difference and why should our listeners care?
That's such a good question. So think about it this way.
Okay.
Phonetics, like your sources highlight, that's the study of the physical sounds we make when we talk,
Yeah.
How those sounds are made in our mouths and throats, what they sound like acoustically, and how our ears perceive them.
Right.
It's like the tangible stuff of speech. Phonology, though, phonology is a little bit different.
Okay.
Phonology is looking at how those sounds work within a specific language.
Got it.
It's about the system of sounds, the rules about how they can be combined and how they make meaning in that language.
So, okay, if I'm getting this right, phonetics is like the nuts and bolts of the sounds themselves. And phonology is more about how those nuts and bolts come together to actually mean something in English.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
And understanding both gives you a huge advantage.
Okay.
Phonetics gives you the practical knowledge,
Yeah.
right? The ability to actually recognize and make those individual sounds. But phonology helps you understand how those sounds behave within English, like which ones can go together, how they might change depending on where they are in a word, and ultimately how they contribute to the meaning.
Okay.
It's kind of like knowing how to play individual notes on a piano versus understanding the melody and harmony of a whole piece of music.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Both are really important for a full appreciation.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's tackle this, like secret code.
Yeah.
The International Phonetic Alphabet, the IPA.
Yes.
What is it, and why should you, our listener, why should you care about this?
So the IPA, your sources make this really clear. It's a standardized system of symbols. And it was designed to represent every single sound that humans can make when they speak. Think of it as like a universal translator for pronunciation.
Right.
And for English learners especially, I mean, English spelling can be kind of crazy.
It really can be.
The IPA is like this lifeline.
Okay.
It gives you this really reliable connection between the way a word is written and how it's actually supposed to sound.
So no more staring at a word like, I don't know, though or through or tough, and just having to guess how that oaf is going to sound.
Exactly. You know, your sources really emphasize this. That's a key benefit, consistency. Unlike English spelling, where the same letters can be pronounced like a million different ways, each symbol in the IPA is for one and only one specific sound.
Okay, so that takes out a lot of the guesswork.
So much guesswork.
Got it.
When you see an IPA transcription, you know exactly how it's supposed to be pronounced.
Yeah.
It's like you have this precise blueprint.
And it's not just for English, right? Your sources mention it's used all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Linguists, phoneticians, language teachers, dictionaries all over the globe use this. So by learning the IPA, you're not just improving your English pronunciation, you're getting this tool that can help you understand the sounds of any language.
That's amazing. Okay, let's get into some specifics here. Your sources give this great breakdown of some basic IPA vowel sounds. Can we walk through a few of these, maybe the ones that tend to trip up English learners and even, sometimes native speakers?
Yeah, let's do it. So let's start with a really important difference, the long E sound, like in C. In IPA, that's IS.
Yeah.
Now compare that to the short I sound in sit, which is sit.
Okay.
Notice how the length is different. And your tongue moves a bit too.
It does.
Then we have these things called diphthongs.
Okay.
Like the E sound in say. This isn't just one vowel sound, it's a glide from one vowel E to another. E. Those can be tricky because of that movement within the sound.
Right, so there's a shift happening while you're pronouncing the vowel.
Exactly.
What about some of those open vowel sounds?
Okay, good one. So think about the A sound, as in cat.
Okay.
This is an open front vowel. Your mouth is pretty wide open and your tongue is towards the front. Compare that to dua, the sound in car. This is an open back vowel. Your mouth is open, but your tongue is pulled further back.
Okay.
Now here's where those dialect differences your sources talk about come in. The vowel in pot might be a short opened back vowel, particularly in British English. But in lots of American accents, it might sound more like the days in car. And similarly, the ah sound in law, that can be a long sound, more common in British English again.
It's amazing how much variety there is just within the vowels and how the IPA helps us see those differences.
Totally.
What about the ooh sound?
Good question. We have the short oo, as in put, which is in, and the long oo in blue, which is used. Biggest difference is the length, but there's also a subtle change in how much you round your lips. Then we've got the mid-central vowel, as in cup, and probably one of the most common sounds in English, the schwa.
The schwa.
Represented by, like in the second syllable of about. It's usually unstressed and pretty short.
The schwa is everywhere, isn't it? It's like the chameleon of English pronunciation.
That's a great way to put it.
Blends right in.
It really does. And then lastly, as you mentioned before, those diphthongs like E and say and by, those could be a challenge because you have to smoothly transition between two different vowel sounds.
Right. Okay, so vowels are a whole world of complexity. What about consonants? Your sources talk about how they're made, where in your mouth, whether your vocal cords vibrate, which is voicing. How does the IPA help us understand all that?
All right, so with consonants, we describe them based on three main things.
Okay.
First, the place of articulation, so where in your mouth the sound is produced. Second, the manner of articulation, meaning how the airflow is blocked or not.
Okay.
And third, whether your vocal cords vibrate when you make the sound, and that's the voicing. The IPA symbols are made to reflect these categories. For example, we have what we call voiceless voiced pairs.
Okay.
The only difference between the two sounds is whether your vocal cords are vibrating. So think about P, as in pad. It's voiceless. They'll do the same mouth movement but make your vocal cords vibrate. And you get B, as in bat. That's its voiced counterpart.
Okay.
We see this pairing with a bunch of sounds. D and D, K and G, F and V, like in think and D as in this, and S and Z like in she and as in measure.
It's crazy how that tiny change in voicing can totally change what a word means.
Absolutely. And the IPA is so cool because it shows those differences with separate symbols.
I see.
Then we have other consonants, like aish, that's a glottal fricative. The sound is made by pushing air through your vocal cords when they're slightly closed. We have nasals, like M, N, and E, as in sing, where air comes out your nose. Then there's L, a lateral approximant, the air goes around the sides of your tongue.
Wow, it's more complicated than you think.
Right. And R, that can sound different depending on the dialect. And lastly, we have semivowels, or glides, J, like in yes, and W, as in wet. Understanding all these categories really helps you grasp how English sounds work together.
Your sources also briefly mention diacritics and suprasegmentals. What are those, and how do they help make communication clearer for you?
Diacritics are these little marks you can add to IPA symbols. They show finer details about how the sound is made, like the length of a vowel, which we saw with the colon. They let you be super precise. Suprasegmentals, though, are features of speech that go beyond just a single sound.
Like what?
Stress, rhythm, and intonation. Stress can change the meaning of a word, like present the noun and present the verb. Rhythm is how stressed and unstressed syllables create a pattern in a sentence. Intonation is the rise and fall of your voice.
Okay.
That can show grammar and emotion. These things are super important for sounding natural and easy to understand.
So the IPA isn't just a list of sounds, it can show the dynamic parts of language too.
Exactly.
Now, how do we use this to actually understand English sounds better? Your sources use thought as an example.
Perfect example. So in British English, thought is whole. Let's break it down. That is that voiceless, the S sound, the one at the beginning of think. Then we have that long aw vowel, like in law, and finally T, the voiceless T sound. By knowing these symbols and the sounds they make, you can figure out how to say the word, even if the spelling doesn't make it obvious.
That's so helpful. And your sources also talk about how the IPA is really useful for understanding how pronunciation is different across dialects. Can you give us a couple more examples of that?
Of course. We talked about bath before. In a standard British accent, it's bizen, with that long des vowel. But in a standard American accent, it's usually beth, using the e vowel sound like it in cat. Another own is water.
Okay.
In a standard British accent, it's often death, but in general American, it's more common to hear der car, different vowel sound, and a softer T, which we could show with a different symbol in a more detailed IPA transcription.
Okay.
Then there's schedule. In British English, it's often just in American English. Different beginning consonant sound. The IPA shows these variations really clearly, which is super helpful if you talk to people from different English-speaking places.
It shows you that there isn't one right way to say things.
For sure.
There are all these cool variations, and the IPA gives us a way to understand them.
It's like a common language for pronunciation.
Yeah, exactly. Your sources also talk about minimal pairs. What are those, and how can they help train your ear to hear those tiny sound differences?
Minimal pairs are pairs of words where only one sound is different. Everything else is the same.
Okay.
Like ship-fed and sheep-sped.
Okay.
Only difference is the vowel. It in ship and I is in sheep. Because that difference is so small, but changes the meaning, practicing with minimal pairs is a great way to get better at hearing those subtle differences.
So it's like a workout for your ears.
Exactly. It makes you pay attention to the details and trains you to hear those tiny variations.
Cool. Okay, now that we know more about what phonetic awareness is and how the IPA works, let's talk about how you can actually develop this awareness. Your sources give some really practical tips.
They do. And the key is to actively participate. One of the best ways to start is just by consciously listening to native speakers. Don't just hear the words, pay attention to how they say them, the rhythm, the intonation.
Okay.
Another great technique is shadowing.
Okay.
You listen to a short audio clip of a native speaker and try to imitate them at the same time, copying their pronunciation. This forces you to focus on all those little details. And then there are phonetic drills, consciously practicing those tricky sounds. Working with minimal pairs, even trying tongue twisters.
Yeah, tongue twisters are fun.
They are, and they help build muscle memory for speech.
Okay, those are good starting points.
Yeah.
What about more structured exercises? Do your sources recommend anything specific?
They do.
Okay.
First, keep practicing with minimal pairs. You can make flashcards or find lists online. Listen to the correct way to say them, and then record yourself.
Yeah.
Compare your recording to the original. Self-assessment is really helpful. Phone isolation exercises are good too.
What are those?
That's where you focus on hearing a specific sound within a word, whether it's at the beginning, middle, or end. That helps you become more aware of individual sounds.
Okay.
And finally, sound sorting activities, where you group words by their vowel or consonant sounds, can solidify your understanding of the sound categories.
So it's a mix of focused listening and practice.
Exactly.
What about technology? Are there any tools you'd recommend for phonetic training?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There are so many great phonetics apps out there now.
Yeah.
Like Sounds, the pronunciation app, or ALSA Speak. They have interactive exercises and often give feedback on your pronunciation. Online dictionaries with IPA transcriptions, like the Cambridge or Oxford dictionaries, are super useful for looking up the correct way to say a word.
It's good to have those at your fingertips.
Right. And even just regular speech recognition software, like what's on your phone, can use to check yourself sometimes.
That's great. So there's a lot we can use. Now let's talk about some actual steps. What exercises would you suggest our listener could start doing right now to improve their pronunciation?
Well, your sources recommend a few things you can start today.
All right.
Jump into minimal pair practice.
Uh-huh.
Make flashcards or find lists. Listen to the correct pronunciation and record yourself. Then compare. Try doing phone segmentation.
Okay.
Take some words and break them down into their IPA sounds. Pick some tongue twisters that target sounds you find hard and practice them. Record yourself reading a passage and compare it to a native speaker reading the same thing. And definitely try some online phonetics games and quizzes. Those can make learning fun.
Those are all great ideas, and they seem manageable.
They are.
Now, for people who want to work on their accent specifically, how does understanding phonetics help with accent reduction and fluency?
A strong understanding of phonetics is like the foundation of accent reduction.
Okay.
It helps you identify the specific sounds you're pronouncing differently from your target accent. By practicing those sounds and how they're supposed to be made in that accent, you can gradually change the way you speak. This makes your pronunciation clearer and gives you more confidence, which makes you more fluent.
And your sources mention some specific techniques for accent modification.
Yes, phonetic drills that focus on the sounds that are different in the accent you want. Shadowing native speakers of that accent, paying attention to their pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm, and getting feedback on your pronunciation from apps, teachers, or even native speakers who are willing to help.
So it's about being deliberate and putting in the effort.
It is.
What are some common challenges people face when they're trying to develop their phonetic awareness, and how can they overcome those challenges?
One big one, as your sources point out, is that English spelling can be so different from how words are actually pronounced.
Yeah, that can be frustrating.
It is. The best way to deal with that is to really use the IPA. Anytime you're not sure how to say a word, look it up in a dictionary that shows the IPA transcription.
Okay.
Then practice saying it based on that, not just the regular spelling. Another challenge is all the regional variations and dialects in English.
Right.
The best thing you can do is listen to lots of different English speakers, so you get used to hearing different pronunciations. And remember, like your sources say, the goal is to communicate clearly, not to have some perfect accent.
That's important. It's about being understood, not about being perfect. Your sources also touch on some advanced topics in phonetics. Can you give our listeners a glimpse into those, maybe pique their interest?
Definitely. We talked a bit about suprasegmentals earlier, the stress, rhythm, and intonation.
Right.
Those have a big impact on how natural and expressive your English sounds. Exploring those more deeply can really refine your speech. And then there's connected speech. That's about things like elision, where sounds get dropped in fast speech, assimilation, where sounds start to sound like the sounds around them, and linking, how words flow together naturally. Understanding these things can really help you understand fast, natural speech and make your own speech sound more fluent.
It's like there's a whole other level of complexity beyond just the individual sounds.
Exactly.
So hopefully this deep dive has shown you that understanding the subtleties of English sounds through phonetic awareness and the IPA isn't just something academic.
Right.
It's a really practical skill that can help you communicate better and feel more confident.
Absolutely.
We covered a lot today. We defined phonetic awareness, explored the IPA, looked at practical techniques and exercises, discussed how this knowledge can help you overcome common challenges and even improve your accent. We really hope you'll take some of these strategies and try using them in your own learning or communication.
Yeah, give them a try.
So here's a final thought for you to think about. How might a deeper understanding of the subtle sounds of English open up new levels of understanding and connection for you in your everyday conversations and as you continue learning? It's not just about pronouncing things right, it's about truly understanding and being understood.